Lanark, Frontenac, Lennox and Addington.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I guess the member for Welland does indeed have insight into the Liberal Party. Not one Liberal member stood up to speak to this time allocation bill, and the honourable member did indeed recognise it. Madam Speaker, I don't know. Would it be out of order for me to ask that the Liberals wake up and engage in this debate? Would that be out of order? That
yes, it would.
Madam Speaker, don't ask. I guess we'll just let them. We'll let them have a little snooze there, and I'll see if. I wonder if some debate may actually get them engaged and woken up over there. But, Madam Speaker, looking through this time allocation bill and Bill 135 reminds me of the time when I worked in public works. And back in public works and construction management, project management, we had a system in place, a very long process system that never worked. But it was a long, cumbersome process. And what it was is we would have various levels of people within public works checking over the plans and checking over the specifications on every project. And lo and behold, the person at the end of the project would find out that the project was all mucked up and it didn't work. And they'd scratch their heads and they would wonder, how did this not get caught? How did these problems not get caught? And I realized that we had checkers checking the checkers, being checked.
That's what it is.
And
who checks the checkers?
Nobody actually did their job because somebody else was going to be doing the checking. There had so many levels of checkers, nobody actually had to do any work. And this reminds me of the Liberal caucus. We have the people in the ministries, people in the bureaucracies, people in the agencies, all supposedly doing their work, and guess what? The final checkers are asleep. They're asleep and they're not engaged. And we now understand why Ontario is in such a predicament with the same process that we saw in public works and construction management is the Liberal Party today. Madam Speaker, it really is a travesty to the people of Ontario that this bill is being passed, and it's being passed by people who have not read it. It is being passed by people who don't have any interest in actually understanding what their vote leads to. And let me just give you a couple examples. Under Schedule 7. We do know that this bill affects 21 pieces of legislation, and we do know that this time allocation motion is to prevent discussion. This motion is to deny people the knowledge of what's in this bill. But let me just point out a couple things under Bill 135 that the Liberals either do not know or do not care, or maybe both. Maybe they just have no interest in their final role of being the checkers. Under Schedule 7, several amendments are made to Section 1.0.10 of the Act, which sets out the authority of Treasury Board to make regulations subject to the approval of the Lieutenant Governor. So we're moving off some decision-making off on regulations. Now listen to this. Currently, subsection 1.0 of the Act specifies that the Minister of Finance is not permitted to delegate certain specified powers. This changes now. Under this Act, the Minister is now permitted to subdelegate his authority. Did you know that? Did the member from Peterborough know that you're delegating out that authority, subdelegating it? This happens again throughout. But now listen to this. Listen to this one. An amendment is made to Section 37 of the Act respecting the use of warrants to enforce the obligation to pay tax. Subrule 60.07 of the Rules of Civil Procedures require that leave of the court be obtained before certain writs are issued. The amendment provides that this rule does not apply for the purposes of Section 37. So, did any member of the Liberal Party read that? Did the member for Stormont, Dundas and Glengarry or the member from Northumberland realize?
I'd ask you to make your comments to the chair and not to members individually.
Realize that they are diminishing and taking away our time-honoured protections of civil liberties. We're now saying the court does not need to issue the writs. It's just ministerial staff can do. We do away with the courts. This is also done, same thing applies under Section 132 of the Act, respecting the use of warrants to enforce the obligation to pay a tax. This rule does no longer apply under here. But there are so many acts that are infringed on here. Same with the WSIB. Oh, that's terrible. WSIB, this act now allows WSIB to go into its reserve funds. We know that WSIB has increased the unfunded liability up to $12 billion. And instead of solving that problem by a little sleight of hand, little sleight of Liberal hand, we now have another mechanism for the WSIB to keep pumping up that unfunded liability by dipping into their reserve funds. Did any of the members on the Liberal side understand that? Did they read that? I did it very much. We've seen by the puzzled looks over there when they are awake that they hadn't read this act. You know, that's really so obvious, and really, Madam Speaker, we can intuitively know that anybody who read this act would not be signing off on it. They would not be approving it or endorsing it. They would be looking for serious amendments to it. However, we have, with this time allocation motion, no viable means to amend this bill. No viable means. It's all going to be done on Thursday this week. Any clause that has not been moved will be deemed to be moved on Thursday. It's a travesty, and it's a travesty that could be prevented if only the Liberal members of their caucus, actually stood up and defended the interests of their constituents and did their job, and not just be concerned or accepting that all the other checkers did their job. Also significant changes, Madam Speaker, under the alcohol and gaming regulations, with significant changes on taxation on beer and wine. But here's another one. Under Section 50 of that Act, Subrule 60.07 of the Rules of Civil Procedure does not apply in respect of warrants issued by the minister under this clause. Another one. And we can go through this hundreds of pages of legislation and see this throughout, this theme throughout the legislation, that the Liberals just don't care about due process, about justice, about civil liberties. Again, Section 20 of the same Act is amended that the Rules of Civil Procedure does not apply with respect to warrants issued by the minister. On and on and on it goes. But however, we have also the Financial Administration Act is significantly modified under this Bill 135. And here's another one: accounting policies and practices. Regulations made under Clause 1 may authorize or require public entities to follow specified accounting policies and practices. I'm not sure what they're trying to change there, but when you go to the next page, Schedule 10, of the Interim Appropriations for 2011-2012 Act. And I just would like any one of these Liberal members to say, here's Clause 2. For the fiscal year ending March 31, 2012, amounts not exceeding a total of $70,400,000,000 may be paid out of the Consolidated Revenue Fund or recognized as non-cash expenses to be applied to the expenses of the public service that are not otherwise provided for. What's this $70 billion for? Does anybody over there know what that $70 billion is for? Has anybody cared to investigate? Or are you just going to put your hand up like the puppets and just pass it? $70 billion. Do we need to know what $70 billion is going to be used for? Obviously, this Liberal government, these Liberal members don't believe so. Madam Speaker, we could go on and on with the travesty of this time allocation motion, but as we do, we know that the Liberals are still asleep at the switch, and they won't wake up until they're kicked out in 2011. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Mark.
Further debate.